Before joining the program, I worked in the technology industry for about 10 years. So I do think the intersection of technology and mental health is important. In addition, I am passionate about the healing power of nature, and then also I'm an advocate for animal-assisted therapy. In my personal life, I am the founder of a nonprofit organization called Just My Smile. We provide support and resources to family of newborns in my community. And then I serve on my local recreation board as well as being a new mom to a 3-month-old. And then we are with Lydia today.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lydia Buglehall. I am also a student in the CMHC program here at Commonwealth University. Um, I'm in my internship phase, so I'm working with kids in a school-based mental health team. I'm very interested in holistic mental health. I am a certified yoga teacher, and I'm going for my meditation teacher training right now. And I'm very interested in bringing um, nature into counseling as well. Um, I think that's all for me.
We do want this presentation to be interactive. We want to hear from you. Please engage whatever you're comfortable with, whether that's using the chat, we'll be monitoring that, or if you want to raise your hand or just unmute and chime in, please, please, please do. So what will we cover here today specifically? We are going to tell you about what nature-based interventions are, if that's something that you are unfamiliar with. So you'll certainly leave with an understanding of that. We'll be exploring the effectiveness of nature-based interventions, and we'll be sharing 3 nature-based techniques that can be used for practice in person or in online settings. We want to know that a lot of this work, I think misconceptions are, well, if I'm not in person, how can I do this with my clients? And so we want to make sure these are all adaptable and flexible to the settings that you're working with, the ages and populations that you're working with.
All right, so this is going to be great for you to put in chat. We would really appreciate it. So when you hear the term nature-based interventions, what comes to mind? Some of you might be thinking a walk in the park, gardening, sitting by a stream, things like that. But nature-based interventions do go beyond that. So let us know what comes to mind when you hear this term. Mindfulness, yeah. Being surrounded by trees. You can also share feelings about when you're surrounded by trees. What feelings does that bring up?
I know my go-to when I hear nature-based interventions is gardening.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that's just because that's what I like to do or just because I've used it so much in the past. But when I hear that, I'm always like, oh, I wonder how my client's doing that did this. Fresh air, natural, clean. Yeah.
I love back to basics. Yeah. Taking away a lot of the noise. Connecting, grounding. Yeah, these are great.
Thanks, everyone who shared. Maybe you thought of common terminology. We also asked for emotions, but nature-based approaches encompass a lot of different approaches out there if you're looking at the literature. So, ego therapy, or there's more specific activities or techniques such as like the nature meditations that are being mentioned. But all of these on the slide are related to nature-based interventions in the literature, and by no means are this a comprehensive list, but just to get us thinking about nature-based interventions. So nature-based interventions, what are we talking about here? In a nutshell, it is connection with the earth. So, nature based interventions work to establish psychological healing by way of the relationship that the individual has with nature. So, it's often taking what's found in nature and using that to support clients with a variety of issues. There's a growing body of research that's highlighting the positive benefits of connecting with nature. And some of the issues that have been studied and it's been found to be effective with, you can see in the slide, mental and physical well-being, stress and anxiety, aggression and depression, concentration, and rehabilitation for disabilities. So these are examples. I will say the literature talks about interventions, and we'll talk about limitations later, but it is a little bit dated in some places when it comes to looking at the actual effectiveness. And it can be very difficult if you're thinking about some of the things that you put in the chat. It can be very difficult to measure. Like, is this effective? What exactly is being effective? There's a lot of factors here in this space. So nature-based interventions can take many different forms. It can take place in the natural setting when you're thinking of nature meditation. It can take place in a group setting. It can be in an office, out of an office. But here are a couple of things to consider. So, interactions with other people. Maybe that nature meditation takes place in a group therapy setting, which is actually pretty common. So in this particular example, members are able to connect with nature and also spend time reflecting on how this piece of nature relates to them and how they can learn from it. And group members are able to share what they're learning. So, for example, maybe there is this walk, and I'm using that as an example because a lot of people mentioned it in the chat. I remember being on a walk, and there was one particular person, older, who compared themselves to the older trees. And they were talking about feeling worthless given their decline in health. But actually, after seeing the important role of the older trees to protect others, to provide shelter for animals and shade for younger plants, they were able to grow in their self-worth. So that was a really, really powerful thing. There's also animals. I know that Claire is going to talk about this later, but animal assisted therapy, animals are introduced into the healing process, and studies have shown that just playing with a dog is so beneficial to be able to reduce aggression and agitation in some populations. And then there's sports. Fly fishing is an example that's being used a lot with military veterans. Plants, a lot of horticulture therapy out there. We'll talk about some use of plants and garden related activities later. But like just digging in the soil, planting seedlings, like can be really, really weeding can be really, really powerful and therapeutic. And then there's also art. So thinking about how we can use the environment and bring that into art, which we'll talk about. Jen, I see in your comment, fly fishing is also being used with cancer survivors, which is great. Thanks for that example. So why does it work? And how does it work? Here, nature is considered the co-therapist. Actually, as far back as 1989, nature-based approaches were found to be restorative when looking at clients who had, and it started with clients who had a high level of sensory stimulation, which did not allow for like deep level thinking in sessions. So they went outside. And then since then, just and some of the literature still remains dated in places, but it's growing. We're continuing to see this evolve. Nature is seen as a meaningful place that acts as a buffer from daily stressors. So I know a lot of my clients or even students that I'm working with in our counseling program, I'm like, how can you take a break? Like we're seeing clients back to back. How can you take a break throughout their day? Is there go outside? Like, can you just go outside for a couple of minutes and how healing that is for them? Other studies have noted it helps with better sleep quality, decreased anxiety, and increased ability to accept personal limitations. So, literature is just kind of all over the place trying to support nature based interventions right now. Anyone in the chat, any comments, I guess, so far when we're thinking about nature based interventions and that healing component?
I know personally when you mention taking a break and going outside, just even that 3 minutes of sticking your feet in the grass or taking a deep breath outside can have such an effect on my personal stress levels. It's usually one of the first things I do if I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed.
Thanks, Claire. Sydney, using nature as a means of grounding is something found very effective. Yeah. I know when I was early in my career as a counselor, I never thought to use nature in any way, really. It was just one of those things that as I began practicing, I was bringing it more into sessions and I was like, what is this? Like, what am I doing? Is this effective? And so by asking those questions, I got to explore this whole new world of nature-based. Seeing some great comments, and I appreciate them in the chat. There's a flower stand near work, and Kelsey makes it a point to take a walk around the flowers with coworkers. That's great. So it's like social engaging too, with social support, grounding, earthing, Joshua. I keep wondering how to bring this in to people living in urban areas where nature is less accessible. Denise, so glad you mentioned that. We are going to talk about how we can use this in an online setting as well. Spending time in nature is resetting, dirt under your feet is grounding. And then, Jen, we bring a group of members to an organic farm. Oh, that's great to harvest flowers. Some counseling centers do have gardens and they have spaces like this. They're adding green spaces. There's a lot of funding in it these days, actually. Dr. Kuniak, you just mentioned that in the Pittsburgh area. So that's really, really cool to see. I know not too long ago, I was actually asked to present to a group of providers that were working in Ukraine because they said there weren't safe spaces to work with. There weren't safe spaces and there weren't green spaces given all of the conflict that's occurring over there. And they wanted to know what can we do in terms of nature-based interventions, what's effective. So that's a great transition into.
So when we think of nature-based approaches, we might immediately think of going outside or just being out in nature, but sometimes with our work, we're confined to being in an office space or having clients from a distance on even on the computer. So what are some ways that you can offer these approaches even when you're in an office space or you're not able to go outside? You can comment in the chat or unmute and make some comments.
Yeah, so a lot of our comments so far was about like actually going outside and being with nature, but what are some ideas for when we're thinking telemental health? Or like we can't go outside. We're confined to our working office because our policies don't let us go outside with clients, or our clients don't want to go outside.
Dr. P, this is Josh Moyer. I also have one of these daylight. I don't know how it's effective for me. I don't know. I have one of these sunlight kind of, I don't know, whatever it is, a daytime lamp. I don't know, whatever it's called here, but it's excessively bright, but it's supposed to help with. And now, of course, I can't turn it on. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of neat, and it does make me feel a little bit more energized when I have that afternoon slump. So that might be something to suggest to a client. It wasn't. I mean, it was pretty cheap on Amazon, so um, somebody got it.
Those are like almost like mimicking the outdoor light
Right,
inside.
and
So
yeah,
that
yeah.
yeah,
Someone
that's
got
a
it
great
for me. I
idea.
wanted to bought it for myself, but yeah, I think it works when I need to.
And I
Actually,
see,
oh, go
go
ahead.
ahead, go ahead. I see some people saying like bringing the outdoors in, bringing plants in to your space, water fountains. That's a great idea too.
I love the upcycle piece too, because I think of some of the limitations as counselors, like we don't have, unless we have grants, we don't have a lot of money that, and we don't make a lot of money. So we don't want to be spending a lot of our own money to be bringing in a lot of things that could be effective when it comes to, how expensive are plants. So we do want to think of accessibility in that sense, but also on our budgets. Great ideas to have like natural plants in the office, but I love the idea of upcycling materials for projects just so that too, it can be very symbolic. It sounds like what you're saying there, Jen, of turning waste into a beautiful purpose, being able to use that as an analogy in the work that we're doing with our clients.
I love Kelsey's suggestion of an open window, but for those offices, maybe in cities where that's not possible, Sydney's suggestion of the nature walk video in the background still provides those nature noises and that experience without maybe having the honking and traffic noises as well.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing. We are going to share a couple of nature-based approaches, and perhaps you can think about what you're doing or what what you could change about where you're working.
All right. So horticultural therapy is involves the use of plants and nature to enhance the social, spiritual, physical, mental, and emotional well-being of participants. So when we think about nature and plants being therapeutic, this is not a new concept. Their roots are traced back to ancient civilizations. They even had they created gardens for calming and restorative properties. So therapeutic gardens themselves can be a very great intervention to use with clients, especially because there's so many different types of gardens and they all have different, like they're very similar, but there are some key qualities that make them different. And depending on the needs of the client, you can kind of use those to see what is best for their healing. So there are healing gardens, enabling gardens, rehabilitation gardens, restorative, and meditation. So the biggest thing on when you're looking at the differences, and it just depends on what the specific needs of the clients are. So healing gardens can be found more in like hospitals and healthcare settings to reduce stress and promote relaxation and just enhance the overall healing process. And then enabling gardens are a little different because these are where the clients will get more hands-on, physically gardening themselves, and this could improve like physical strength and coordination if our clients are in need of those resources as well. Another one I thought was really interesting was rehabilitation gardens because it's not only creating healing within the client, but they're also bringing like healing within the environment that they're doing. So it might be in like Dr. Peitel mentioned earlier, like weeding the garden. So you're seeing like this is what it started as, and we're gonna weed this, we're gonna make it something else, something new. So there's like this symbology, like the symbolism in within like working in those gardens and putting your hands in the dirt and then seeing what comes out of it. So there's the healing properties within yourself as well as within the environment. And there's just all the psychological and emotional balance, being in a quiet and stress reducing environment. So these all can gardens can create that healing within the individual and helps them to again find the best ways to find healing in in ways that work best for them. Because there's the different gardens, there's all different ways that they can promote healing. So it just depends on, again, the needs of the client. And if you see in the pictures, there's all different kinds. So depending on the accessibility, if they're in wheelchairs, they might not be able to like walk through something, but they might be able to go into a garden. Um, does anyone have experience like going into a healing garden or any type of therapeutic gardens or working with clients in these places?
I will jump in and add, I'm thrilled to see the labyrinth. I work a lot with labyrinths, and there are accessible labyrinths, and many more are being designed that way today. So, and I've been with a colleague who was in a wheelchair on a labyrinth. So I was thrilled to see that in your presentation. Thank you.
Awesome. I love to hear that.
There's actually a Zen garden not too far from here. And my friend who's a therapist, she has retreats and meditations and yoga classes there. And for some of the retreats, I actually have participated in them as I play keyboard and I make ambient sounds on my keyboard as the retreat is facilitated, and it's really awesome. People love it. It's just a great space, and it's in like kind of a, I don't want to say urban, but like it's not a rural area, but there's just like this little haven. It's really cool.
I love that. That sounds really interesting.
I had a medical issue about 10 years ago when I was in the hospital for a little over a week. And the hospital that I was in had a healing garden kind of area that looks a lot like that one with the labyrinth in your picture there. And I was allowed to go out there for like an hour once a day and just kind of sit in the space. And I feel like the more I did that, the better I got, like the healthier I felt. It was really great.
Like seeing the healing or the nature outside, you can like, it symbolizes the healing that's going on inside yourself too. Oh, I see in the chat about the finger labyrinth. That's pretty cool too. Oh, and we're moving on. I'm excited.
All good. So, a lesser known version of animal assisted therapy that I want to talk about a bit is butterfly therapy. So, a lot of us, when we think of this animal assisted therapy, we're thinking of more traditional animals like dogs, horses, that's more well known. But animal assisted therapy can be very effective with butterflies. So, it's a unique way to create peace, serenity, this experience for clients. And it's a bit more accessible, and I'll talk about that. But the presence of butterflies is thought to be calming and help enhance mindfulness in clients. And one of my favorite things is the life cycle metaphor. So the life cycle of a butterfly is a powerful metaphor for personal growth and transformation, as is, growing plants. But this is a great way to bring a different view of it. So, using butterflies in the life cycle, we can think of it as mirroring the client's own therapeutic journey. So, let's think of the caterpillar phase, and that is where challenges are faced, where the client is seeing these difficulties in their life, and they're looking forward. The chrysalis phase is that time of introspection and reflection and preparation. And then the butterfly phase represents that personal growth and new beginnings. So this metaphor, it can be used with clients of all ages to look at what's going on in their personal experiences and kind of examine what they're going through and help them look forward. All right, so let's go to the next slide, please. All right, so looking at specific interventions when implementing butterfly assisted therapy, we can adapt it to a couple different settings. So the first one I want to talk about is mindfulness and observation. And this is the most accessible when it's warm out, for the most part. It can be as simple as observing butterflies butterflies in a garden, on a nature path, in a park, just kind of walking around, going outside and observing butterflies and engaging with them. The observation and working together through this can ground clients and help them regulate their emotions through the calm and focus by focusing on those butterflies, kind of talking through what stage of life they're in and how that relates to the client. Another intervention is guided imagery and journaling. So this can help clients process their own transformations and changes by journaling through their thoughts and feelings, guided by the butterfly growth metaphor through these stages. They can use this for the reflection and processing. And I really like this because, again, I said it can be used with clients of all ages, and you just adjust the metaphor to where they are in their life and kind of how they're processing their emotions in different ways. And then looking at accessibility, when it comes to different settings, gardens and local nature is a great outdoor way to interact with butterflies. So some communities also have seasonal butterfly releases. That's something I've seen, and that can be a really great way to engage. And then I know the Pittsburgh Zoo does, and I know there's a lot of zoos that do have those year-round butterfly exhibits. That does come with the cost of going to the zoo and everything that comes with that, but that is an an outdoor kind of year-round experience. When we are looking at indoor uses of butterfly therapy, um, butterfly kits can be shipped to client homes or therapy spaces, and they can give clients the ability to nurture the caterpillars themselves from to butterflies with the option of releasing them depending on the time of year. I've done this myself, and I believe the kit costs $30 to $40, so it's not free, but it is a lot more accessible than dog or horse therapy, the different forms of animal-assisted therapy. So being able to do this in real time with the clients through these kits and examine where the caterpillars are as they're growing and changing into butterflies, and then eventually releasing them or keeping them in the habitat that they come in, because they do have a relatively short lifespan. So they will stay alive for a few weeks inside after. That's also an option. So it is more accessible for clients who can't participate in outdoor activities. It's interactive, hands-on, and can be done at their own home or in the office.
And then we also have eco art therapy. So this is using natural materials, things found in nature to create art. And I know Jen mentioned earlier about upcycling materials for a project. So this is that could be exactly an example of this, going outside and just finding things that are in nature that the client can find in nature and using those as an art project and connecting those to just their experience and what's going on, what they're working on therapeutically. And it does create that grounding and healing connection with nature, especially because when you're using the materials found in the environment of the client, they're really connecting to their environment. So this might look differently. The two different pictures on the side. So the bottom one, there's rocks and sand. There might be some shells in there. So they're in a beach environment versus the top one, they're more in a with trees. They have like leaves. They did like a circular thing. So there's many different ways you can create art with natural materials. It's really just bringing that creativity with the client and seeing what they really create for themselves. And this is especially helpful for clients with grief or trauma and just processing those, maybe not being able to verbalize what's going on, but using that art to create and then maybe talk about it after.
I know I'm one that uses eco art a lot. And when I can, I'll actually go out with, I think I've done it more with kids, but I'll actually go out and just have them collect materials. And it's kind of like play therapy, and that you're, oh, like that's a really pretty leaf. Like, why are you picking that one and not this one? You can process some of that, and then you can bring it back and do something with it later. You can also have clients bring it into session as homework. Like, I'm hearing that the beach is your like safe space and a place that is really restorative to you? Do you have a beach that is close to you? Could you go and get sand from that beach? So like helping to facilitate that process and have them bring materials in as well. And I'm seeing a lot of good conversation too about the use of apps. So maybe they aren't close to the beach, but being able to help find resources where they can experience being at the beach from home. That leads us really, really nicely into our next activity. It's going to give me, I'm going to need a little bit of time to set it up. But Claire is going to take us on a nature walk, which we've heard expressed interest from the chats, and she'll walk you through this. But as she's explaining what we'd kind of the purpose of this virtual reality technique, I am going to get the video ready. So I'm going to stop share and reshare. So Claire, go ahead and explain this a little bit to us while I'm doing that.
Absolutely. Sounds good. All right. So this is going to be a virtual experience. So we talk about accessibility, and that is what we're going to give you a little sample of today. So this should allow for the calming power of nature wherever you are right now in your own space. So we're going to walk through a forest in British Columbia. And as we do that, we're going to engage each of our senses. So first, I'm going to get you all prepared, and then we're going to play the video. So I want you all to find a comfortable and upright position. I want you to plant your feet firmly on the ground and rest your hands comfortably on your thighs or on your desk. We're going to open them in a minute, but for just a minute, please close your eyes and bring your attention to your breath. So there's no need to change your breathing pattern. Just observe your natural inhale and exhale and the pause that's in between. Try and feel the rhythm of your breath as a grounding force. As thoughts arise, and they are going to, acknowledge them without judgment, redirect your focus to the present. And then whenever we're ready, we're going to play the video. We're going to let it play for a little bit, and then I'm going to guide you through each of your senses. All right, so let's start by engaging each sense one by one. We're going to start with hearing. So start by tuning into the sounds around you. You might hear distant noises or subtler sounds of your own breathing. You'll hear birds chirping. You'll hear leaves rustling. Allow yourself to notice these sounds without labeling them. They simply exist. Next, smell. So shift your focus to any smells that you can notice. Maybe it's the scent of your morning coffee or the smell of the outdoors if you're near a window or sitting outside. Sometimes closing your eyes can enhance your sense of smell. Next, let's focus on sight. So with your eyes open now, look at this nature walk and notice the colors, shapes, and textures in front of you. Maybe there are new details that you notice as we go along. All right, next, taste. So focus on any tastes lingering in your mouth, or simply become aware of your tongue and your saliva. The sense is subtle, but it can be surprisingly informative. And then finally, touch. So feel the contact points, your feet on the ground, your body in the chair. Notice the temperature and the textures that you're in contact with. Maybe touch a few of the objects around you, connecting the sense of touch with what you're seeing in front of you. All right, and as we finish up after a few moments, take a brief pause, reflect on how you feel now compared to when we started this activity. All right, so feel free to share unmute yourself or share in chat. Do you notice a change in yourself or how you're feeling, or what did you notice as we went through that? I like that Dr. K, your cat was invested. Yep. I didn't think about that, but I'm sure they loved the birds. Settled, calm, more focused. Yeah. So not just for the session today, but as a tool that you can use in the future when you need to center yourself. What ways can you think about integrating this specific practice in a counseling setting, or thinking about how it could enhance the experience of you and a client in the future? Memories of being in nature. Yep, it's a wonderful way to feel like there is more accessibility with clients who aren't in nature. And the video we watched about a minute or two of, and it is a 4-hour video, I believe. So there are many videos like it, of real places, real people walking through these experiences, and you can join them. And you can have it on in the background. You can have it on in front of you while you do other things. But you can really have this experience for more than just a few minutes, or just for a few minutes when you need it.
And as a counselor, you can do this guided practice with your clients, or you could even have, like, again, considering confidentiality and things like that. But if you're doing telehealth, why not let them be in nature walking as they're talking to you, if that's something that's calming to them? So maybe you're not there together, but you make it a point to allow them to attend in a space that isn't that traditional counseling office, which provides some limitations when it's real nature. Virtual reality is a big thing, virtual reality therapy, and just using different types of goggles and things like that. You can also purchase, I don't have that on, I've presented on in the past, I don't have it in this presentation, but that could be something too that you could invest in, or if your clients have, they could use that as well to take themselves in a different way out into whatever world they want to be in. We have someone on the call who's does a lot of research on gaming, and so I was thinking of that too.
And keep in mind the different settings that you can test with clients. So maybe someone wants to be at the beach, maybe someone wants to be on top of a mountain and experiencing the snow. There are there are experiences like this for many different settings that might help clients in different ways.
Yeah, I know for me, I'd be at the beach. I like nature, I like the nature walk, but I would definitely, if asked, I'd request the beach. So thank you all for engaging in that. I'm being mindful of our time because I definitely want to make sure we leave time for questions at the end. But there is research out there that talks about the use of technology and assisting with clients' treatment plan, despite their counseling setting. That was one thing that I had just mentioned before with not only using like your computer or your phone, but also potentially using, VR related type equipment. But Linda Buzzell does a lot of research if you're interested in sources on different levels and perspectives of ecotherapy. And it gives you more of that background about how it is human-centered. It's a human-centered approach in which nature in general or in connection with nature improves mental and physical health. So that could be something that you use for yourself. Reviewing that or using like bibliotherapy with your clients to, if they're saying, oh, this could be really helpful to me, but I don't quite get what ecotherapy or nature-based means. There are some limitations, there are some barriers. We wanted to take some time to talk about that today. So one thing to be mindful of, we mentioned a little bit of this before, but we can be limited due to ethical guidelines and practice organization standards. So when we think liability issues, there could be rules of the practice against things such as taking clients outside for walks. And why? Because think about it, confidentiality is at risk. What if your client gets hurt? Maybe the liability is or the practice liability is that it doesn't kind of cover the grounds around it. So that's something to be thinking of. Funding, it does sometimes require equipment and space. We also want to be mindful too of if it's something that can support our clients, making sure that it is accessible for them as well. So I know in the past, I've had a client that said, oh, gardening could be really therapeutic for me, but I also knew that just struggling to get basic needs was something that had been expressed. So like being mindful of that, like would I really want to keep encouraging going out there and buying all of these plants to create a garden when I knew that was issue, putting food on the table for them and their kids. So being able to balance that. Also, just in our understanding, that's another thing, advocacy and in knowing that research can help us increase this use as an intervention. Research is limited in looking at how some of these and some of what we gave as examples today is effective with diverse groups, different ages, different cultural standings. So one thing to be thinking of is if you're doing this work, how can you bring it to research? How can you say, okay, I'm going to use a succulent in group therapy, and I'm going to actually find ways to measure how effective it was as an intervention for group therapy. You're doing this work, and it can be so beneficial to give that back in the form of research. So just be something, be mindful of being able to contribute to our field in that way. And nature-based therapies are often used, but they're not documented as that being the focus of an intervention. So if you're having your client go outside and they're attending their session from being outside, maybe you're working on a lot of other things and you never really document that that's occurring, and that also is happening in research too. As you can imagine in other case examples, it's easy sometimes to bring in nature-based therapies into the existing therapeutic relationship. It might only be the focus in one session. It could be much larger. So thinking of that eco art example, you're bringing nature in and allowing the client to partake in this expressive art, or what's called as art and nature experience, versus something that's the focus. So that would be having a fly fishing group therapy. That's more of the focus versus maybe a one-time session. So you want to be thinking about that too, of in the work that I'm doing, what makes the most sense to be thinking about this work. But just a couple of barriers when we think about ethics, that's really, really important. Confidentiality, how you're going about that, and suggestion of the work that's doing. Make sure you're competent in the work that you're doing. And as part of that, we want to make sure that we are looking at the effectiveness in the research, and then just informed consent, being really, really transparent about, like, yes, I know you want to attend from the beach, and I know that's important to you, and I am okay with that, but keep in mind that people might be walking by and they might overhear your session. So having those conversations is really important. So just a little point about that, the use of technology can assist with the client's treatment plan. We talked a lot about this in the interest of time. I'm not going to go through this a lot, but do remember you can provide this as homework as well, and do it as a processing in the next session. I'm going to open it up for questions just in the interest of time. So any thoughts or comments as you've viewed this presentation, as you're looking and reflecting on the work that you are all doing? I know there's a lot of like symbolism in some of these, and I had mentioned analogies earlier, but one of the more recent clients that I worked with came in and was talking about being an empty nester. And they're like, I just like don't know what to do with all this time and energy, and just like really processing that loss. And we got to this point where she was talking about how, like, before she had kids, she had beautiful landscaping and gardens. And I said, well, what does that space look like now for you around your house? Oh, I don't know. Like, I haven't really kept up with it, or someone else has landscaped for us. And she started a garden, and she said it was just so healing. She was now like taking care of her plants, and like all those busy times where she was taking care of her kids, she's out there with her plants and talking to her kids on the phone. And like she was able to use that as a good transition to this next stage. But working with families too, like having them build a garden together, when we're thinking, like, we haven't talked about family therapy, but there's a whole lot you could do with gardens and families or couples, and it can be really symbolic where people are planting their plants, what plants they're choosing, to understand dynamics and relationships. So something else for those who are working with couples and families. I don't see anything coming in through the chat in terms of like questions. We thank you all so much for being here today. We've enjoyed our time with you, and feel free to reach out to any one of us if you want to collaborate or just continue the conversation. But wishing you a wonderful day as you continue on with our conference.
Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you, guys.